The biggest challenge that I see from COVID-19 and the ripple effects that we don't even know yet, I see it in a couple of ways. I see it first and foremost in, if we're looking at it from an independent film standpoint, the costs are tremendous. Just breaking down a budget the other day, you know, if you $120 a test, you have a cast and crew of 45, you're going to shoot for 5 weeks. You have to test a minimum of 3 times for each crew and cast member. That doesn't count the tests before and the 2 weeks of quarantine. Just in tests alone, you're looking at over $80,000 to test those 45 people, a total of 15 times, 3 times per week over 5 weeks. It doesn't include the PPE equipment, the cost of putting somebody on set. I bring these things up because this could be the new normal. But when you have $500,000 to $800,000 to work with, you're looking at over 10% of your budget gone. It's never going to go on the screen. And people will get sick. If you're looking at it from the insurance standpoint, and we've talked about this a lot in different classes and conferences that we've had, Dan, there's a lot of communicable disease coverage that's not there anymore. What do you do if your lead actor gets sick? Well, you still have to pay your cast and crew. And if you can't shoot and you're 2 or 3 weeks in, you have 2 more weeks to go, what are you doing with those people? They're not going to sit around and not work for free. So you have to look at financially from budgeting and scheduling. I think we have to learn to work with smaller crews, which is something, as we talked about earlier, I'm very comfortable with, but there's still the chance that that assistant camera operator is going to get sick and he's going to infect your DP. If you lose your DP, that derails the flow, the style, the look of your film. It could affect me as the director producer. It could affect, again, our star or whoever. And I think as far as the other side of it goes, it's going to affect, I think, the financial structure or whatever's left of it of our studio and streaming big business platforms. I mean, take a film like Greyhound with Tom Hanks that just released on Apple last week. That was never the plan for that film. You're talking about an $80 million all-in film with Tom Hanks that was shot for the big screen. And they just put it out on iTunes last week and Apple Plus. So, you know, there's going to be that ripple effect. And then I think there's always going to be those studios that think they're going to get it in a drive-through maybe. That'll be the new thing. I think people are going to have to learn how to stretch a buck. I think, you know, indie rats like us are, I think a lot of people are going to start looking to us for answers and solutions on how do we do this, because we're used to delivering, you know, a high quality product or a high production value product for a fraction of the cost. And I think the studios and the TV networks and all that are going to have to really start retooling their process. I think the biggest challenge facing the entertainment industry today is just the unknown. Hollywood in general has always evolved. They've always shifted. What, you know, we've talked about was about every 8 years, there's a shift, there's a change. The problem is they're being forced to change. It's not something like a radical filmmaker like Quentin Tarantino shows up one day and flips the script, or Christopher Nolan comes and changes the way people tell stories. You're talking about a global pandemic that literally is telling actors, show up, hair and makeup ready, bring your clothes to set, or, you know, it's not show up and go into the wardrobe trailer and have everybody mixing and matching. Things are going to change. And with change comes a lot of growth. I love change in an industry, but for the first time, Hollywood's, I think, being forced to change. It's nothing that's going to happen gradually, or, you know, the old famous thing where a guy starts as a tadpole, becomes a man, and, you know, goes back into whatever. We have a massive curve that we're being forced to deal with. And I still think there's just so much unknown. And I think that's the problem. You still have executives that haven't gone back to work. When you talk about the existential change that's coming to Hollywood, it's quite drastic. You think about what happened when silent films became, as they call them, talkies, you know, films with sound, or black and white to color. These were massive changes, but they also, there was a getting used to. I mean, while there were silent films, they were starting to introduce the talkies, but they still had some science with some pullover. You have to realize we have an industry that was completely shut down like that. And we now have to think about retooling how we do it. It's forced. It's a massive change. I think we've had a mass exodus here in LA with our actors first, that those who weren't working, who, you know, let's call it like it is, a lot of them work in the food and service industry. Well, the restaurants are closed too. Rent in California, LA especially, is not cheap. You know, I know 3 of our favorite restaurants my wife and I go to. When we went back, we were asking for our favorite servers. How are they? Are they still here? And every restaurant had servers that had gone back to Iowa, Ohio, Florida, wherever they were from, because they weren't working in film and they couldn't work in their job and they couldn't afford the overhead. So you talk about the change, the forced change that we have, that it's completely out of our control. And I think it's going to be one of those things that's going to continue for a while. And I'm not a doom and gloom guy. I like to see the glass always half full, but there's the reality of what people are willing to do right now. I see the future, off the record. I see the future of this industry. I see it's almost like a mass execution, mass exodus, mass extermination. Obviously, the A-listers are going to survive, but will they? Will it go back to doing Christopher Nolan type level movies? Who knows?